Our study this week is on Jesus fulfilling Old Testament prophecies. The lesson study comes from the books John 5 verse 17, John 5 verse 20, John 5 verses 36 to 40, John 5 verses 46 to 47, John 13 verse 18, John 17 verse 12, Jeremiah 2 verse 13, Zechariah 9 verse 9, and John 8 verses 12 to 30. Our memory text is from John 5 verse 36, which says, "But I have a greater witness than John's, for the works which the Father has given me to finish, the very works that I do, bear witness of me, that the Father has sent me." For centuries, the prophets of ancient Israel foretold the coming of a Messiah, one who would bring salvation, justice, and peace to the people of God. This Messiah was depicted as a figure of profound significance, a light to the nations, a deliverer from bondage, and a healer of souls. As the story of Jesus unfolds in the Gospels, Christians believe that he embodies these ancient hopes, fulfilling prophecies that echoed down the corridors of time. The Hebrew Scriptures, what Christians call the Old Testament, carry dozens of prophecies and messianic visions. One of the clearest comes from the prophet Isaiah, who spoke of a virgin conceiving and bearing a son, who would be called Emmanuel, meaning God with us, Isaiah 7 verse 14. In the Gospels, the birth of Jesus to Mary, a young virgin, is seen as the realization of this prophecy, signaling that God had entered the world in human form. Isaiah also described a suffering servant who would be wounded for our transgressions and crushed for our iniquities, Isaiah 53 verse 5. This image contrasts with typical expectations of a political leader, suggesting instead a Messiah who would endure pain and suffering for the sake of humanity's sins. In the accounts of Jesus' crucifixion, Christians see a perfect match with this portrayal. Jesus, who bore the physical and spiritual suffering of humanity, is believed to have fulfilled Isaiah's vision of a servant who sacrifices himself in the place of others. The prophet Micah adds another layer to the messianic expectation, pinpointing the town of Bethlehem as the birthplace of this ruler, Micah 5 verse 2. When Jesus is born in Bethlehem, Christians recognize it as a key detail in his identity as the promised one, the shepherd king from David's line who would gather and lead his people. In the Psalms, we find numerous passages that Christians interpret as foreshadowing Jesus' life and ministry. Psalm 22, for instance, describes suffering and abandonment, with phrases such as, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Psalm 22 verse 1. This is echoed in the words Jesus speaks on the cross, expressing his profound connection with these ancient words. Psalm 16 speaks of God's Holy One not being abandoned to the realm of the dead, which early Christians saw as a prophecy of Jesus' resurrection, a pivotal event that fulfilled not only Psalm 16 but other scriptures that promised victory over death. Jeremiah and Ezekiel spoke of a new covenant between God and his people, a time when God's laws would be written on their hearts rather than on tablets of stone, Jeremiah 31 verses 31 to 33, Ezekiel 36 verses 26 to 27. Jesus' teachings and his Last Supper with his disciples are seen as the institution of this new covenant, an invitation for humanity to experience God's grace on a deeper, more personal level. The themes of light, redemption, and healing run throughout the prophets' writings, and Christians see Jesus fulfilling these not only through his words but through his actions, healing the sick, raising the dead, forgiving sins, and proclaiming God's kingdom. In his life and ministry, Jesus fulfilled the promises of a compassionate and righteous servant, one who would gather all people into the embrace of God's love and mercy. As the New Testament writers interpret these events, they assert that Jesus is not merely a prophet or teacher, he is the promised Savior who accomplished what the Old Testament prophets had foretold. For believers, Jesus is the embodiment of God's covenant love and the fulfillment of promises given through the prophets long ago, the culmination of God's redemptive plan from the beginning of time. We can see again and again in the book of John all the things that Jesus said and did which revealed that, yes, the Messiah, HaMashiach, the Christ, had come to Israel. And he had come, in fact, as one of them, a Jew born in Bethlehem, just as the scriptures had predicted. Yet, as John wrote, he was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. John 1 verse 10. He was in the world was made through him, and yet the world did not know him? That's an amazing statement. And, as we can see in John and in the other Gospels, many people didn't know him even though they should have, especially because of all the things that Jesus did and said. And, even more so, because the Old Testament scriptures pointed to him. This week, we will look at more ways John revealed Jesus as the Messiah, and also, we will look at why some people still continued to reject him, despite all the powerful reasons affirming him as the Christ. What can we learn from their mistakes?
In addition to the specific miracles that John used to point to Jesus as the Messiah, he also recorded the broader discussion about the signs, works, and wonders that Jesus did. The signs and wonders, in and of themselves, were not proof of his messiahship because many prophets, sometimes false ones, also performed miracles. John did not record the signs because they pointed to a great miracle worker only. The signs that John wrote about had the unique character of pointing to Jesus as the Messiah and to show that he, indeed, came from God the Father himself. Read John 5 verse 17, John 5 verse 20, John 5 verses 36 to 38. How do these verses describe the relationship between Jesus and God the Father, especially in the context of the signs? Jesus used the signs to show his close working relationship with the Father. The two were one. The works showed that the Father is in me, and I in him, John 10 verse 38, see also John 14 verses 10 to 11. The purpose of Jesus' coming was to do the works of the one who sent him, in order that these works might be made manifest to the world. That is, he came to do the work that the Father sent him to do, and the works that he did testified, clearly, that he was from the Father. And yet, as we have already seen, even despite the powerful signs and the testimonies from many people, people still chose not to believe. The religious leaders asked Jesus, "How long do you keep us in doubt? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly." Jesus answered them, "I told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name, they bear witness of me." John 10 verses 24 to 25. If Jesus had come right out and said he was the Messiah, the religious leaders, looking for anything they could find against him, would have pounced on him. Knowing this, Jesus instead pointed to the works he had done. If Jesus had said he was the Christ, they could easily seek to deny that. But how could they deny the signs, the works, and the wonders? These were powerful testimonies to who he was and where he had come from. How can we protect ourselves from having the kind of hard hearts we see among these religious leaders? In what ways might we be fighting against the work of God in our own lives? Have a blessed day as you meditate upon this day's lesson. Shalom and God bless you.